It was the beginning of my sophomore year of college, and I was excited about the new semester. My friends and I had just moved into a shared apartment near campus, just a 5-minute walk away, and everything felt beautiful and perfect. The location was great and cozy. The building looked a little old, with old wooden floors creaking underfoot, and a fireplace that added a pleasant warmth. It was a place you would see in a movie, and we thought it would be ideal for us to spend the next few years there. But without me realizing it, there was something strange and wrong with the apartment. And it was something that I will never be able to forget until today. And I can still feel the trauma when I think back to those times. It all started the first week we moved in. In the morning and afternoon, the atmosphere in the apartment felt normal and even very comfortable. But at night, we often heard strange sounds, like soft, scratching sounds coming from the walls. At first, we just thought it was the sound of old plumbing, or maybe the house was starting to deteriorate due to old age. But the noises got louder as time passed, and I felt something was wrong. It wasn't just the apartment that was making the noises. There was something else going on in the apartment. In the second week, one night, I had to stay up late studying for an exam. My other friends had gone to bed hours ago, and the house felt eerily quiet. I was sitting at the kitchen table, surrounded by my textbooks, when I heard it again. It was a scratching sound. It started as a faint sound, came from behind the wall, then slowly got louder. It felt like something was trying to break through the wall and get out. My whole body was covered in goosebumps, but I was still trying to focus on my studies, pretending it was just the usual noises in the apartment. But the scratching sound didn't stop for a while, and it got closer and louder. Then, the sound changed. It wasn't just a scratching sound anymore. It was a soft, slow, pulling sound, followed by a faint tapping sound. It was like something, or someone, was crawling around the wall. I was scared and froze. My heart began to pound. I got up and checked the door, but everything seemed normal. I walked down the hallway. My footsteps echoed as I moved in the stillness of the night. The walls were suddenly silent. I stood there for a moment, listening to the heavy silence. My mind was in disarray, and my breath caught in my throat. A few moments later, I heard a knock on the door. A single, deliberate knock. I hesitated for a moment, then moved slowly to open it. When I looked outside, no one was there. The hall was empty and cold. I quickly closed the door, my heart pounding. That was when I realized something that made my blood run cold. The knocking wasn't coming from the door. It was coming from inside the walls. The realization struck me hard, like a ton of bricks. Something was in the walls of our apartment. The next few days passed in a state of anxiety and fear. Each night, the noises grew louder and louder. It wasn't just scratching anymore. Faint but distinct whispers could be heard through the walls at night. I could barely sleep. My friends were too scared, but none of us knew what to do. It felt like we were being terrorized, and it seemed like we weren't alone in the apartment. We even began to leave all the lights on every night. Then, the next night, a big storm came. The wind was howling through the trees outside. The rain was pouring down really hard, and there was a lot of thunder. It was the storm that made you want to stay inside all night. But that night, something horrifying happened. Something none of us could explain. We were all in the living room, trying to distract ourselves with a funny movie, when we heard it. The scratching sound came again, but it was loud, deafening this time. Something was clawing at the walls, trying to break through and get out. Then the lights flickered a few times and went out, plunging the apartment into darkness for a split second. When the lights came back on, we saw something that made us scream. Suddenly, a small crack appeared in the wall next to the fireplace. It had never been there before. It grew wider by the second, and as we stared in horror, there was something moving inside it. It was like a shadow, rolling and crawling through the crack. It was a shape, but not human. It was something darker, something that should not be in this world. Terrified, we ran to the door, but when we tried to open it, it wouldn't open. The lock was jammed as if something on the other side held it shut. We were trapped inside. The crack in the wall grew larger, and its shape began to take shape. It moved closer to us, its dark presence pressing on the air. We could hear faint, hoarse whispers, words we couldn't make out, coming from the crack. Then, the shadow began to crawl out through the crack. That's when we heard the knocking again. But this time, the knocking wasn't just coming from the wall. It was coming from the floor beneath us. The entire apartment shook with each knock, as if something was pounding from below, trying desperately to break through. I don't know how long we stood there, paralyzed with fear. But eventually, the knocking stopped. The shadows on the wall slowly disappeared, and the cracks slowly closed. The apartment was quiet again. The storm outside had passed, and we were in the darkness, trembling with fear. After that, we never spoke of that night again, but we all knew what we had experienced. The apartment was not just haunted by strange noises. It was haunted by something ancient that had been lurking within its walls for years. After that night, none of us dared stay in that apartment. We packed our things and left the next day without looking back. I still don't know what was inside those walls, but I can never shake the feeling that something remained waiting. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the knocking again, just like before. At first it was soft, but then it got louder and clearer. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe it was still trying to get out. Before we dive into the next story, if you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing to our channel and clicking the bell icon so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Your support truly encourages us and helps this channel continue to grow. And don't forget to share these stories with your friends and family. Thank you. This took place in Oregon during my third year of college. I was skeptical and never believed in things that did not make sense, including the supernatural. However, I enjoyed horror movies and scary stories because I thought they were just stories and fantasies. My perspective changed during my third year of college when I experienced something I still can't fully explain until now. It all began when I moved into an old off-campus dormitory that was part of a historic building, formerly a hospital in the 1920s. The dorm had been closed for decades before the campus transformed into student housing. The rent was cheap and the location was perfect, so I signed the lease without a second thought. My roommate, Jared, was a medical student, a quiet, focused person who was rarely home except to sleep. I loved the silence because it gave me a lot of space to study and think. But this time, things started to feel different and weird, almost as soon as I moved into the dorm. The first strange thing I noticed was the mirror in the hallway. It was a long, antique mirror bolted to the wall. The wood was cracked, and the glass was slightly warped, but it looked like it had been there forever. One night, I passed it on my way to the bathroom, and I felt a white shadow behind me, like someone was following me. It couldn't have been Jared, because I was the only one inside the dorm. I turned around quickly. No one was there. When I looked back in the mirror, it was just me. I laughed it off and thought, maybe I was just tired. But then the weird things kept happening. Little things like whispers echo in the empty hallway, knocks on the walls that seemed to come from inside the drywall. Even my textbooks were rearranged on my desk while I was out. After that happened a lot, I started having trouble sleeping. And when I did, I had nightmares. It was always the same dream. I was trapped in a hospital hallway, running from something I couldn't see, but could hear its breathing behind me. One afternoon, I came home early from class and found Jared sitting on the floor in front of the mirror, staring blankly into it. He didn't even blink when I called his name, just stared into the mirror. I had to shake his shoulder to get him to react. And when he finally did, he stared at me like I was a stranger. Then he said something that made my stomach churn. "Did you hear her whisper your name too?" I was stunned and didn't know what to say. That night, Jared went to his girlfriend's dorm and didn't come back for days. I was alone in the room, and that's when I found an old notebook tucked behind the heater. The pages were yellowed, and the handwriting was shaky. It belonged to a student named Eli Park, who had lived in the room a decade earlier. The first few entries were mundane, and frankly, quite dull. However, after a certain point, the content became disturbing. He was writing about the same mirror, about the dream of being watched, about a girl in a white dress who only appears in reflections. The last entry is just one line, written over and over again. "She wants to get out." I tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was a joke or a writing exercise, but my instincts felt different. 2 nights later, it all became clear. I woke suddenly at 3:17 a.m. My phone screen lit up beside me. There were no notifications at all. The room was cold, colder than usual. I heard the floor creaking in the hallway. Then silence. Then a woman's voice whispered, "Come and see me." I froze. I knew I was the only one in the room. Jared still hadn't returned. The whisper came again, closer now. "Come, see me." The whisper came from the mirror. Against all logic, I stood. Slowly. The hallway was dark except for the soft streetlight glow outside the window. I walked to the mirror. My reflection looked normal. Tired and scared, but normal. Then it blinked. But I didn't blink. My reflection blinked again, smiling, then tilted its head in a way I never had before. My real body stood still, frozen with fear. But the reflection moved closer. I stepped back, my heart pounding. The reflection paused for a moment, then pressed its hand against the glass from the inside. And then I heard it again, louder this time. A voice that came not from the mirror, but from inside my head. "Let me out!" The glass began to crack. Tiny cracks spread out from the center, spiderwebbing outward. I ran. I didn't even try to grab my phone. I just ran barefoot out of the dorm, down the stairs, and into the cold night. I ended up spending the night at a friend's apartment across campus. I didn't sleep at all, just sat there, shaking, trying to convince myself that I wasn't going crazy. The next morning, with the sun and people around, I finally gathered the courage to return. But I couldn't do it alone. I brought my 2 friends with me. When we got to the room, everything seemed normal. The mirror was still cracked, the book was gone, and the chill had disappeared. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, watching. I packed up my things in silence. It took me 15 minutes. My friends waited inside with me. I didn't dare look in the mirror again. And that was it. After that, I never went back to that room again. I told the university I had a family emergency and needed to move back home for the rest of the semester. Then I found something that shook me even more. The dorm room I was staying in, room 3B. It had been closed for years due to structural issues. They had just reopened it that semester. I tried to find out more about Eli Park, the student who wrote the notebook, but no one seemed to remember him. No notes, no social media, nothing. It was as if he had been erased. To this day, I still don't know what I saw, or who was in that mirror. But sometimes, when I walk past a reflective window or a dark TV screen, I noticed something moving in the wrong direction. A smile that wasn't mine, a wink that came too late, and a faint, barely audible whisper. "Let me out!" My name is Kevin, and this incident happened when I was in my 3rd year of college, in a small town where winter seemed never-ending. It all started with a group assignment in a psychology of human behavior class. Our professor, Mr. Hartwell, was a strict and always serious lecturer and had a reputation for never tolerating laziness. He randomly assigned groups for a case study assignment that would last an entire semester. I remember clearly that he had read out the names of my group members in class. Me, Jenna, Luis, Ava, and Darren. Out of all of them, I only knew Jenna. The rest had never been in the same class before. We first met in the library, rented a small study room, and started discussing. Everything seemed normal until Darren showed up. He was late, his face was pale, he rarely spoke, and he didn't make eye contact once. We thought he might be quiet or introverted, so we didn't want to push him too much. He just sat in the corner, writing something down, and occasionally nodding when discussing the project. But now, when I think back, there was something strange about him, something we didn't realize until it was too late. Over the next few weeks, we met regularly, but Darren would come whenever he pleased. Sometimes, he would just sit in the room, even though no one saw him enter. Darren also never replied to the group chat. However, when asked about his part of the assignment, he always handed over neat handwritten notes, and his analysis was also deep. We thought he was a strange but useful type of genius. Finally, the first strange incident began to appear. One day, Jenna was chatting with Mr. Hartwell about the project structure. During the discussion, she mentioned that Darren had made a good contribution. But Mr. Hartwell's expression immediately changed. "I don't remember Darren being in your group," he said. "Your group only has 4 people." Jenna thought he was joking. She even showed him the notes she had written when the group names were announced. But Mr. Hartwell remained convinced. He said Darren's name was never mentioned. It wasn't in the official documents either. When Jenna told us, we were all dumbfounded. I also reopened my notes. Darren's name was there. We decided to ask Darren directly at the next meeting. But that week, Darren didn't show up. He didn't show up the following week either. And from then on, things got weirder. I felt like I was being watched. Not just on campus, but even when I was alone in my room. Ava said she often woke up in the middle of the night because she heard soft whispers outside her dorm door. Luis found pages of strange assignment notes containing detailed discussions we had never discussed. Finally, Jenna dared to ask her friend, who worked part-time in the campus administration, to check student data. And the result? Darren's name wasn't there, not just in our class, but in the entire university system. It was like he had never attended college there. We panicked, trying to find a logical reason. Maybe Darren used a pseudonym? Perhaps he just joined the class without officially registering. But deep down, we knew something was wrong. Saturday night, I was working late alone in the study room. Around 11 p.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway, soft and heavy. I opened the door and looked outside. Empty. But the air was immediately bitingly cold, different from the usual cold. And I saw him, Darren, standing at the end of the hallway, staring directly at me. His eyes were blank. His face was pale. Then he spoke, but not from his mouth. His voice seemed directly inside my head. "You shouldn't have found out." I blinked. He was gone. I ran out of the library that night, went back to my room, locked the door, and slept with the lights on. The next day, Jenna called, crying. Luis was gone. He never came home after our last meeting. The campus police searched for him, but there was no trace. A few days later, Ava was found unconscious in her room. There were no injuries, but she wouldn't wake up. The doctor said her brain was in a state of shutdown. They couldn't explain why. We were scared. Jenna began to fear being alone, and I didn't even dare sleep without a light. One night, I woke up and found a page of paper on my desk, handwritten. Darren's handwriting. 4 people made a pact. 1 broke it. Balance must be restored. A few moments later, my phone vibrated. A message came in from one of my college friends. "Kev, have you heard about Jenna? She disappeared last night. The police are on campus looking for her." My hands immediately shook. A chill spread throughout my body. Jenna? Disappeared? An uneasy feeling immediately enveloped my chest. My memory immediately returned to the strange nights during the group project, the sound of invisible footsteps and, of course, Darren. I stood frozen in the middle of the room, trying to think clearly. But the more I thought about it, the clearer one thing became. I couldn't stay in this room tonight. I quickly packed my laptop, notebook, wallet, documents, and enough clothes into my backpack. After ensuring everything was locked, I left and walked quickly to my friend Adrian's dorm. I had chatted with him earlier, and luckily, he immediately replied, "You can stay here, bro. I feel bad about all this too." That night, I slept on the 2nd floor of Adrian's dorm. But sleep wasn't really what happened. I was mainly awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand what was happening. And for the first time, I was terrified of being on campus. After that, I never went back to that room. I dropped out of campus a week later, told my parents I was stressed and wanted to transfer universities. But I never told them the truth. Who would believe me? And a week ago, I got an email from an anonymous sender. It contained just one sentence. "This project is not finished." And there was an attachment, a scanned image of handwriting. Darren's writing. So, the next time you get a group assignment from your professor, try to count your group members carefully and make sure who is actually sitting at your desk.